Hare Krishna, Vanchakalpatrubhyascha Kripasindubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So welcome to our continuation of Srimad Bhagavatam. We're beginning over again and we're on Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 2. So first we'll say this, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this chapter is the questions by the sages. And here we have what's it called the questions of the sages at Naimisharanya. That's what Sridhar Swami has as his title. So the text 2. You remember the last one. I'll just read the translation is there. That's the one that's kind of really operatic. Janmadhyasya yatum vayaritratarshcharche ambigan swarat tene brahmaridaya adikavaye bhuyanti yatsuraya tejo varimidam yata virimayo yatra trisargum misha namna swena sada narastaguhakam satyam param dhimahi. So the next text goes like this. Dharma projita kaitavotra paramo nirmatsaranam sutam vejam vastavam matra vastu shivadam tapatrayo mulinam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Kate Kimba Parayarishvara Sadyo Ridya Varujyate Trakatibi Shubhistachanak. So the translation here by Srila Prabhupada, completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. This text has undergone a few revisions. Like in this version now, which is in the Veda-based, it says the Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva, and then in brackets it says in his maturity. An earlier print edition from the BBT leaves out in his maturity altogether. But if you go back to the original Prabhupada version that Prabhupada translated in India, it goes like this. It has, in this Bhagavat Purana, all so-called religious activities covered by fruitive intentions are completely rejected, and the highest truth, understandable by the cent%, which is an Indian way of saying 100%, or British probably, cent%, pure-hearted devotees is inculcated. The highest truth is the factual reality distinguished from the shadow, is described herein for everyone's well-being and causing uprooting of the threefold miseries. The beautiful Bhagavatam is compiled by the great sage Sri Vyasadeva, parentheses, in his mature stage. And as such, what is the need of other scripture, parentheses, for self-realization? As soon as a person applies his attentive and submissive oral reception, A-U-R-A-L, oral reception to the message of this Bhagavatam, the Supreme Lord at once becomes fixed up, compact by such culture of knowledge, in parentheses, of knowledge, in parentheses. So it's there in the great sage in his maturity. So it was taken out and then put back in again, but in brackets. But you'll see that what happens later on, it describes Vyasadeva doing all this literature and compiling all the Mahabharata and all these works and still feeling despondent. And then Narada Muni comes to him and says, why are you despondent? And he says, you haven't told enough about Krishna. And so therefore he writes the Bhagavatam. So it is his maturity. That's exactly what happens. So anyway, we look at this, Dharma Projita Kaitavotra. So Dharma, which is Kaitava Dharma, covered by fruitive intentions, or you might say, what Kaitava means, the word Kaitava means fraud, deceit. Kaitava Dharma. It also refers to gambling sometimes like that. So here, that's why it's put in here that it's materially motivated. This is Kaitava Dharma. Cheating Dharma. Because gambling is cheating by this kind of idea. So this propounds here in Parama, the highest truth, for the Nirmatsaranam Satam. Nirmatsaranam, Nirmatsara, here the 100% pure in heart. The word Nirmatsara, Matsara, or without Matsara, without envy or jealousy or selfishness, because Matsara means greedy, selfish, hostile, envious, jealous, so on. So these are who have, these are the Kaitava, the 100% pure in heart, in the word for word. So this is the Parama, the highest truth, which is understandable, Vedyam, by those devotees who are pure, 100% pure. Then the highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion. It's Vastavam. And then Shivadam, giving well-being by Tapatraya Umulinam. Mula is a root, so Umulinam, uprooting the Tapatraya, the threefold miseries. The threefold miseries are those caused by your own body and mind, by other inimical living beings, and by the devas, that is to say, floods, hurricanes, yeah, those kind of things, like viruses. I don't know if it's by the viruses or the devas, whatever it might be. Anyway, these are the threefold miseries, that they're going to happen, whether you like them or not. So it uproots the threefold miseries. So then this is compiled by the Mahamuni himself. And what is the need for other scripture, others? Because as soon as this is heard, and then the word is that Prabhupada uses, avarujyate, becomes compact within the heart, hriddhi avarujyate. The word avarujya avarud means to enclose, to keep anything locked in your heart, like your grief, you're hiding your grief, you keep it locked away in your heart. So that's avarudya. So the Lord himself becomes locked, fixed in the heart of the devotee. That's where this from, this avarudya. So he's established within his heart. And so that's the idea. Bhanu Swami's translation, and so this added, what's the need for any other scripture? This will do it. Huh? Well, what's the need for when it says parai, others? It's sufficient in itself for God realization. Says Bhanu Swami, in his translations, always follow the commentary of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. The Supreme Lord becomes immediately captured in the heart, so he puts it first, of the accomplished devotees by hearing Bhagavatam, and even by those who have suddenly developed a desire to hear. So he does this. So you can either, these established devotees, but anyone who just wants to have a desire to hear. This does not happen with other works. In the Bhagavatam alone, created by the Lord himself, is presented the real permanent object. This is this established thing, huh? Which can be understood by those without selfish intentions, and which bestows auspiciousness and release from the material world of miseries. In the Bhagavatam alone is presented the process for attaining that highest goal, devoid of any material goals, and liberation. So that's his. So I'm going to discuss the purports, first of Prabhupada's and Vishwanath Chakravarti. So Prabhupada says, religion includes 4 primary subjects, namely pious activities, economic development, satisfaction the section of the senses, and finally liberation from material bondage. This is a sequence that is Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, right? That's Dharma. People perform, these are materially motivated, Dharma, you perform pious activities. Dharma, you follow Dharma. Why is that? For Artha, wealth. Dharma, Artha, Kama. Why do you want wealth? For the satisfaction of the senses. And then when you finally become disgusted of that by sense gratification, then you go for liberation when it happens. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. This is the things that are taught in the Vedas. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. So that's when he says this Dharma, this is religion, is these things. So that's civilization, because irreligious life is a barbarous condition. Indeed, human life begins when religion begins. Eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating are the four principles of animal life. Yeah, this is the four activities. You eat, sleep, fearing. Prabhupada often says defending yourself, and mating. This is what animals do, and that's mostly everything we do. Is, having enough to eat, a safe place to sleep at night, comfortable beds, sheets, pillows, all those things, defending yourself. Yeah, we're bristling with defenses and cameras at the door and so on. And then mating, of course, that's a big industry, the mating industry, big time. So he says these are common both to animals and to human beings. But religion is the extra function of the human beings. So dharma, artha, kama, and then moksha. Without religion, human life is no better than animal life. Without dharma, that is to say. Therefore, in human society, there's some form of religion which aims at self-realization and which makes reference to man's eternal relationship with God. In the lower stages of human civilization, there is always competition to lord it over the material nature. Or in other words, there's a continuous rivalry to satisfy the senses. Driven by such consciousness, man turns to religion. How can I, maybe I need some of the gods have to help me out a little bit in this competition for sense gratification. He thus performs pious activities and religious functions in order to gain something material. You got to pay for a tight bombing pad on that. Was one book where a guy was satirizing World War II, where the general told them to pray for a tight bombing pad. What's the name of that book? I forgot. It was a very famous book at its time, right? Yeah. He told the chaplain and the army chaplain that everybody should pay for that their bombs fall correctly. Anyway, to gain something material. That's what you do. Most people, when they pray for material things. I remember once getting in the mail at one time, a few years back, somebody sending you a sacred handkerchief that's been blessed, and you keep this, and if you keep this handkerchief with you, God will give you everything, and you but you have to send a donation back, and it'll be then anyway. That's it's a lot. It's magic, for most people. But if such material gains are obtainable in other ways, then so-called religion is neglected. So you find out when everything is going great, people stop going to church. And then when the floods rise, then all of a sudden they're praying. This is the situation in modern civilization. Man is thriving economically, so at present he is not very interested in religion. This is Kaitava Dharma, materially motivated religion. Churches, mosques, and temples are now practically vacant. Men are more interested in factories, shops, and cinemas than in the religious places which were erected by their forefathers. This practically proves that religion is performed for some economic gains. Economic gains are needed for sense gratification. Often when one is baffled in the pursuit of sense gratification, he takes to salvation and tries to become one with the Supreme Lord. Consequently, all these states are simply different types of sense gratification. And that's what people are thinking a lot of time. What is their idea of heaven? So some kind of like, not boring sense gratification, but it's pious somehow or other, you know. I used to think going to church meant you got a taste for boredom. Anyway, in the Vedas, the above-mentioned four activities, as Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha, are prescribed in a regulative way so that there will not be any undue competition for sense gratification. In other words, regulated sense gratification. Thou shalt not steal. You can get money, but don't take, follow the rules. But Srimad Bhagavatam is transcendental to all these sense gratificatory activities. It is purely transcendental literature which can be understood only by the pure devotees of the Lord, who are transcendental to competitive sense gratification. In the material world, there is keen competition between animal and animal, man and man, community and community, nation and nation. But the devotees of the Lord rise above such competitions. They do not compete with the materialist because they are on the path back to Godhead, where life is eternal and blissful. Such transcendentalists are non-envious and pure in heart. In the material world, everyone is envious of everyone else, and therefore there is competition. But the transcendental devotees of the Lord are not only free from material envy, but are well-wishers to everyone, and they strive to establish a competitionless society with God in the center. I mean, the ideal of Marxism, which was quite prominent at one time, was that people would become, the state would wither away. Everyone would be, there was a kind of a, heaven on earth was their goal by getting rid of class divisions and so on like that and making everyone equal. That hasn't panned out too well with Marxism, but that was the idea. So, and Prabhupada, because that was so prominent in India, this Marxist idea, he said there was a kind of God-centric communism, with God in the center. That would happen. That you would not be envious of anybody else. Of course, we see people, when somebody, anyway, it doesn't go away so easy sometimes. The contemporary socialists' conception. So here's what he's talking about, the contemporary socialist, socialism or Marxism, communism and socialism are both the two different versions of. The contemporary socialist conception of a competitionless society is artificial because in the socialist state there's competition for the post of dictator. You have to remember that India shares a. First of all, even during Prabhupada's time in India, during the Cold War, India was allied with Russia, and America with Pakistan. That was happening during that time, and so. There was a lot of Russian technology the whole Indian Air Force is all Russian MiGs and stuff like that. That was going on. So this is what Prabhupada is talking about, this competitionalist society with God in the center. The transcendentalists are free from envy, but are well wishers to everyone, and they strive to establish a competitionalist society with God in the center. And then he mentions the post of dictator. From the point of view of the Vedas, or from the point of view of common human activities, sense gratification is the basis of material life. There are 3 paths mentioned in the Vedas. One involves fruitive activities to gain promotion to better planets. Another involves worshipping different demigods for promotion to the planets of the demigods. And another involves realizing the absolute truth and his impersonal feature and becoming one with him. So there is also this ambition is there, and a kind of, you want to go to the higher planets, or go to the demigods, and then becoming one with God. So that's the highest, from this kind of where there's some selfish motive, becoming one with God. The impersonal aspect of the absolute truth is not the highest. Above the impersonal feature is the Paramatma feature. So actual Patanjali's Yoga Sutra is theistic. I mean, there's a lot of yoga going on that's not theistic, but the actual Patanjali, Ishvara Pranadhana, is one of the things, worship of God, and that there's the soul and there's the super soul, so that's there. So above the impersonal feature is the Paramatma feature, and so that's yoga. That's real yoga, is theistic. And above this is the personal feature of the absolute truth, or Bhagavan. Srimad Bhagavatam gives information about the absolute truth in his personal feature. It is therefore higher than the impersonal speculation and the Jnana Kanda division of the Vedas, what to speak of the Karma Kanda division. Srimad Bhagavatam is even higher than the Upasana Kanda, that is when there is worship of the different demigods, because it recommends the worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, the Divine Son of Vasudeva. In the Karma Kanda, there is a competition to reach heavenly planets for better sense gratification, and there is similar competition in the Jnana Kanda and Upasana Kanda. Here Upasana is worshipping the demigods. The Srimad Bhagavatam is superior to all of these because it aims at the supreme truth, which is the substance at the root of all categories. From Srimad Bhagavatam, one can come to know the substance as well as the categories. The substance is the absolute truth, the Supreme Lord, and all emanations are relative forms of energy. Nothing is apart from the substance, but at the same time the energies are different from the substance. This conception is not contradictory. Srimad Bhagavatam explicitly promulgates this simultaneously one and different, that's in hyphenated, simultaneously one and different philosophy of the Vedanta Sutra, which begins with the Janmadasa Sutra, that's Bhagavatam 1, that from which absolutely everything comes. So nothing is apart from the substance, but at the same time the energies are different from the substance. Nothing is different from Krishna, yet Krishna is different from everything. He includes yet he transcends everything. So here Prabhupada articulates this idea of Chincha Beda Beda Tattva. Can be conceived as one and cannot be conceived of as different. Neither one of those. This knowledge that the energy of the Lord is simultaneously one with and different from the Lord is an answer to the mental speculator's attempt to establish the energy as absolute. When this knowledge is factually understood, one sees that the conception of monism and dualism to be imperfect. There's one and nothing else, or there's just everything separate. Development of this transcendental consciousness grounded in the conception of simultaneously one and different leads one immediately to the stage of freedom from the threefold miseries. The threefold miseries are those miseries which arise from the mind and body, those miseries inflicted by other living beings, including germs and enemy soldiers and landlords and whatever. And 3, those miseries arising from natural catastrophes over which one has no control. The devas, really. Srimad Bhagavatam begins with the surrender of the devotee to the absolute truth. The devotee is fully aware that he is one with the Absolute and at the same time in the eternal position of servant to the Absolute. In the material conception, one falsely thinks himself the Lord of all he surveys, and therefore he is always troubled by the threefold miseries of life. But as soon as one comes to know his real position as a transcendental servant, he at once becomes free from all miseries. As long as the living entity is trying to master material nature, there is no possibility of his becoming the servant of the Supreme. To master material nature means you become God. That's your God project. I am the Lord of all I survey. And one way to do that is also to survey very little. In classes describing this, told about a time when I worked in an office and there was one secretary who had control over the office supplies, and you had to like go up to her and like offer your obeisances and can I have a typewriter ribbon? You know, this is the old days. There was typewriter ribbon. You know, all these things. The Lord of very little. Service to the Lord is rendered in pure consciousness of one's spiritual identity. By service, one is immediately freed from material encumbrances. Last paragraph of this purport. Less fortunate persons are not at all interested in hearing this Srimad Bhagavatam. I skipped one, right? Oh yeah, where are we? Over and above, excuse me, yeah, a few more paragraphs. Over and above this, Srimad Bhagavatam is a personal commentation on the Vedanta Sutra by Sri Vyasadeva. We discussed that already, Janmadasyataha, that shows this is his own, the Vedanta Sutra is his own commentary. It was written, and that's why until Baladev came, the Gaudiya Vaishnavas didn't have a commentary. And then because we didn't, we were not thought to be bona fide, so we got one commentary, but this was considered, the Bhagavatam, as Vyasadev's own commentary. It was written in the maturity of his spiritual life through the mercy of Narada. That's explained in the Bhagavatam. Sri Vyasadeva is the authorized incarnation of Narayana, the personality of Godhead. Is described as the literary incarnation because he wrote these things. Therefore, there is no question as to his authority. He is the author of all other Vedic literatures. Remember, he at the beginning of the Kali Yuga, he writes them down because we wouldn't have the brains to remember them all. It used to be they didn't have to write them down. So that, writing is not a sign of advancement, but of decline. Srila Vyasadeva is the authorized incarnation of Narayana, the personality of Godhead. Therefore, there's no question as to his authority. He is the author of all other Vedic literatures, yet he recommends the study of Srimad Bhagavatam above all others. In other Puranas, there are different methods set forth by which one can worship the demigods. But in the Bhagavatam, only the Supreme Lord is mentioned. The Supreme Lord is not the total body, and the demigods are the different parts of that body. Consequently, one who worships the Supreme Lord does not need to worship the demigods, because the Supreme Lord becomes fixed in the heart of the devotees immediately. The Prabhupada elsewhere has given the example, if you pour water on the root of the tree, all the leaves and branches are satisfied. So similarly, by worshiping Krishna, all the devas are satisfied. They're not going to be left out. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has recommended the Srimad Bhagavatam as the spotless Purana and distinguished it from all other Puranas. The proper method for receiving this transcendental message is to hear it submissively. A challenging attitude cannot help one realize this transcendental message. One particular word is used herein for proper guidance. This word is shushushu. One must be anxious or eager to hear this transcendental message. He must be this is a desiderative case in Sanskrit. You desire to do something. One must be anxious or eager to hear this transcendental message. The desire to sincerely hear is the first qualification. Less fortunate persons are not at all interested in hearing this Srimad Bhagavatam. The process is simple, but the application is difficult. Unfortunate people find enough time to hear idle social and political conversations. You're right. Guess what modern media has done? But when invited to attend a meeting of devotees to hear Srimad Bhagavatam, they suddenly become reluctant. Or they indulge in hearing the portion of the Bhagavatam they are unfit to hear. In other words, well, here he says here, sometimes professional readers of the Bhagavatam immediately plunge into the confidential topics of the pastimes of the Supreme Lord, which they interpret as sex literature. That is to say, they read the Rasa Leela chapters of Krishna's personal pastimes, which you have to be. It's in the end, it's at the end because it's confidential. Confidential means not everyone's qualified to hear it, so you're supposed to go through the whole thing. But they do this Bhagavat Saptaha, where they will do this in 7 days, And so you can't skip to that part. You have to go through it. Srimad Bhagavatam is meant to be heard from the beginning. Those who are fit to assimilate this word are mentioned in this shloka. One who becomes qualified to hear Srimad Bhagavatam after many pious deeds. The intelligent person with thoughtful discretion can be assured by the great sage Vyas that he can realize the Supreme Personality directly by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam without undergoing the different stages of realization set forth in the Vedas, one can be lifted immediately to the position of Paramahamsa simply by agreeing to receive this message. So that's his purport. And you can understand that when Prabhupada came with this Bhagavatam, he was there to create the audience. That's why he had an ashram, that's why he made devotees, that's why he taught the four regular principles, because he had the book and now he had to create the audience for the book. So he's mentioned these sections, this Upasana Kanda, of sacrifices and things like that. The word Upasana, it also refers to worship, by the way. I mean, worship of the demigods, but the Lord, because the word Upasana means the act of sitting nearby. To attend upon somebody is asana, right? Asana, upa-asana, sitting nearby. And so that's the actual worship. And so upasana sometimes refers to demigod worship, but actually all our worship is called upasana. That's meant to be understood. Now we have a whole other interesting purport, which we're not going to get to, by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, that Bani Swami has actually translated also for us. So again here you get this Dharma Projita, Kaitavotra. It's rejecting this, it's called this Kaitava, covered by fruitive intentions. As I said, Kaitava means fraud or deceit, Kaitava Dharma, cheating. And those who are pure in heart are near Matsara, without envy or greed. And those are some important words here. So we'll see if there are any comments or questions. Good time to start here, and then next week we'll also read the other purport that we have a Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur.
For those of you on Facebook, go ahead and type in your question or comment into the comment section underneath the video. If you are on the phone, you can press *6 and that will unmute yourself so you can ask a question. And everybody's also welcome to use the chat box on Ravindra Svarupa's website. That's rsdasa.com. And before we turn to some other questions, I just one comment is what occurred to me when reading about how we can become little gods of little things.
Mm-hmm.
But the nature is different than Krishna. I mean, Krishna, as the absolute truth, is quite magnanimous. Whereas when we try to become little gods, we get very selfish and kind of tyrannical. It's interesting.
Yeah, that's
difference.
right.
And one question I had from toward the beginning of the purport, when we were talking about people at different stages, and when they're suffering, they pray to God, and then when things are going well, they kind of throw that out. I was just wondering how that relates to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you're familiar with that, of kind of your psychology 101,
Mm-hmm.
the pyramid of you first need to meet the needs, your psychological needs, having water, food, shelter, sleep,
Mm-hmm.
those sort of things, and then there's safety, some sort of employment, resources, love and belonging is above that, esteem for self-respect, status recognition, and then you get to self-actualization on top of that. Something to better yourself. And I'm just wondering if when Prabhupada's talking about those kind of lower levels of when you just need something, you're praying to God when things are going bad, maybe that's different than the self-actualization sort of prayer.
Well, it might be a separate interest. What we discover is that actually if you fulfill your highest need, which is to serve God, everything else is taken care of. You don't have to worry. A devotee doesn't know how to ask anything from God, but it turns out that God, helps him out in so many ways. And as long as his desire is just to serve God, then he gets all facility. And Prabhupada came to America with one desire. He had an order from a spiritual master, which is God's order to go, and he just decided to do it. Now he had no resources, he didn't know together, and he just did it. He had to, do this Bhagavatam and started out, come to America by himself, didn't know what was going to happen. I was told that when he was in New York, he didn't know whether nothing was going to happen, and he would maybe have to go back to India and it would fail, but and then suddenly things started to happen. He happened to be, because Krishna's in charge of timing, there was people who were interested in him, young people, not older, established, but people who really, to join the Hare Krishna movement in the beginning, you had to have people who had dropped out of normal society, being discussed with the Economic Development Program of America, looking for something else, settling for LSD and other things like that, maybe as their spiritual life, and the counterculture, and then you had to drop out of the counterculture into Krishna consciousness. But there it was. That was the original social. He was there at just the right time. That was Krishna's arrangement, and he always had Krishna's arrangement. What to do and when he came, and that's how in such a short time, in his old age, he was able very quickly to spread Krishna consciousness and really root it all over the world. And how did that happen? It was because Krishna was helping him out. So when one desires purely just to serve Krishna, Krishna serves that devotee too, facilitates it.
Just to press that a little further, though, in that pure state of faith in Krishna and faith in the holy name, in that state would one still use common sense? I mean, in the sense of, if I break my arm, I'm just going to rely on chanting the holy name, or am I going to go to the doctor, right?
Yeah. He said that too. And he told, somebody was asking Prabhupada a question once. He said, yeah, in this case, use your common sense, and if you don't have any, ask somebody who does.
Let's see here. Vijay Krishna Prabhu, he asks, related to 112, where I find the synonym kaitava covered by fruitive intention. My question is, why is it that in the spiritual world there is no access to selfish sense gratification? Is it because in the spiritual world only one enjoyer is to be found, namely Lord Krishna?
Well, everybody ultimately enjoys. But as Prabhupada put it, a pure devotee has no way of experiencing happiness except by seeing that Krishna is happy in all respects. So when you've made Krishna happy, you can become happy. That's selflessness.
Krishna Kumari asked, in regards to one and difference, how can we understand the asuras? Is Kamsa the same or separate from Krishna? We hear that Agasura's soul merges into Krishna. In regards to the anarthas representing demons in our heart, are they the asuras, us, or Krishna?
I don't understand that question.
Krishna Kumari, if you can clarify a little bit. I think if in regards to one and difference, how can we understand the asuras?
Well, they are competition. They are not seeing themselves as one with God, and so but if they're killed by Krishna, that's what happens. Only if you're killed by Krishna. Prabhupada said once, if you want to hate Krishna, then he'll come and kill you. And so, but that fate, they when they're merged into Krishna in that way, they're part of the Brahmajyoti, really, and they get that kind of impersonal liberation. But really, from that, you lose your individual identity. You're no. It's a. I mean, for a devotee, that would be kind of spiritual suicide. You know, we want to be able to appreciate Krishna, but and that liberation that they receive may last a very long time, but they may come back down again, you know. Because in the you have a dormant desire for activities that's always there in the living being.
Narhari Dev Prabhu asks, he says, please accept my respectful obeisances. This Bhagavatam is for devotees who don't have any nirmatsara, envy. But if I examine myself, I have a lot of envy for Krishna and his devotees. Still, I want to read the Bhagavatam and develop my understanding of Krishna. How can I really help myself so I can overcome these anarthas like envy within my heart, so I can develop a taste for reading the Bhagavatam?
Well, it's simply part of going along with reading Bhagavatam is following the principles of Krishna consciousness. And that should, I mean, one thing, you know, it's the opposite of the material world. Someone who's advanced in Krishna consciousness is quite humble. And that humility is just realism. And anything that they have or do or get praised for or whatever, they think it's by Krishna's mercy it happened and I'm just his servant and he made it happen and so on like that. And the reason for a devotee to think, to seek out humility is because when humility increases, appreciation, love for Krishna increases. So it's simply I'll pray the Lord, give rid of my God project, get rid of my lording it over project. That's my ignorance, and because once you get a taste for increasing Krishna consciousness, then you're eager for humility. It's not that you've got some slave mentality that, or you're a masochist or something. You just want. It's not that humility for its own sake. It's because you appreciate Krishna more and more and more, and that's what should come to pass. And when I have material attachments, and when there's some pride there or something like that, you just pray to Krishna, please destroy this. And if it looks like too big a project for you to handle, just take the next step. What is the next step? If you're really willing to take the next step in spiritual advancement, then you'll find out that Krishna shows you what it is. Mm-hmm. If we're only officially willing to do it, then he may not. Or he may show it to you and you don't notice. That's the other thing that happens is all the flags are up, this is the way to go, and still, well, no, look over there.
Shivananda Sena Prabhu asks, he says, Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for the class. Srila Prabhupada said in the purport, quote, the proper method for receiving this transcendental message is to hear it submissively. Would you say that modern education discourages this submissive attitude in receiving knowledge? And if so, how? Can we cultivate this submissive attitude without tending towards sentimentalism?
I think that we have to accept the instructions that come from Krishna and the people that help us on that path. That's what's meant by being submissive. Any instruction requires submissive. Now, you always maybe, in the material world, you want to surpass your teacher, become better and things like that. On the spiritual path, it's true. It's the path of humility, and so materialists will not appreciate that. You help somebody out in the material world, and you teach somebody, how to do something very well, and then they take over your business and throw you out or whatever. That happens in the material world, but in the spiritual world, gratitude is always there, it's just. Yeah, we haven't really been trained at all in this kind of. Even in religious societies, you see there's always some group of people that are trying to advance, by getting more recognition, more fame, more all these other things. And you will not be satisfied. You will not get what you want. So you can always pervert that.
Just to add on to that point, I have had the experience, though, in academics where if you are submissive to your professors or show an eagerness to learn from them, there is a lot more reciprocation at that point. It's just kind of this interesting idea that if you show eagerness to learn from them and a little humility, that they really go out of their way to help you. But then at the end of the day, you're supposed to defeat them in somehow, like with your dissertation or whatever it is, at the last moment, jump over them somehow.
Yeah, it's true. No, they do like it. You know, it's a fact. If you get somebody who really wants to learn and is eager to learn, and then a lot of times what comes out of the teacher is even more than they know that they can have to give. You know, it's just spontaneous, and you understand their understanding of things, and you grasp something. Yeah. And if you weren't that way, it wouldn't come out. That's true.
Joshua Hatala asks, he says, this may be too far afield, so if it's not relevant, just ignore. Can one arrive at the conclusions of Bhagavatam or an understanding that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead without direct interaction with the Bhagavatam or devotees? If not, why not? If Krishna is the absolute truth and his form exists in an objective sense, then why can't one realize it without devotees or the text?
Why would you want to do that? When it's, because somehow or other the devotees and the text, they're all part and parcel of Krishna. You know, it's the way that Krishna comes to you. So if Krishna wanted to, he could, you know, just right away, like, show you the way. But somehow or other, you have to be prepared, and the preparations are the ones that he gives. So yeah, I think that it's just a package deal. If I want to know something about Krishna, and yet I don't want to have to deal with the devotees, and I don't want to have to deal with the text, I just want God, you know, am I demanding that he comes, or what? And if I do want God very badly, he'll send something and to see if I want it, and then I take it and step by step, but he sends all these things and still, you know, what to do. I just don't take it. He sends all this, sends that, sends the other thing. You know. So we have to do it his way.
And Kaylee Lilita has a funny comment here. She says that Baji was totally submissive to her teacher, Joshua Hatala, who just asked this last question. And so that panned out, she says. Let's see, we have some more questions. Vijay Krishna Prabhu asks, he says, in 112, where I find the synonym tapatraya, threefold miseries, mind and body, other living entities and superior beings, never stop to make us experience how uncomfortable this material life can be. My question is, if the plan of the Creator, Lord Krishna, is to make the material creation an opportunity for the conditioned living entities to go back home, back to Him, why is it that along the way, back home, back to Godhead, we find so many obstacles, coronavirus being one of them?
Well, that's not an obstacle. It could take you right back to Godhead if you wanted to. Well, I don't know what to say, you know. It is what it is. It makes it the way it is. And you just have to, you know. I once asked Prabhupada, you know, if God is all powerful, why does he require so many demigods to run the universe? And Prabhupada said to me, you don't know how to run a universe. And I have to say in all humbleness, I don't. So I just accept it the way he sets it up. All these things are there. And a lot of what goes on is quite above my pay grade for understanding.
Plus, if everything was perfect, we wouldn't be praying to God in the first place a lot of times.
That's true, is another thing, yeah.
And I also like the idea that these difficulties are a way of actually glorifying people who are really serious about their spiritual lives, because that comes to light even more.
But people have asked me, well, God, why does if he was really generous, he'd just give you heaven and you wouldn't have to worship him. But the point is, we are constituted as worshipers of God. There's no separate heaven where we can be all these things and so you want to merge with God, you lose your identity completely. You want to become a demigod, well, that's your God for a while, but the time runs out. He puts you in charge of a universe, and you got that for a little while, but eventually your time comes.
And Vijay Krishna Prabhu asks, in relation to 112, where I find the synonym sushushubi by culture, to cultivate a plant I need sun, water, and fertilizer. My question is, what do I need to cultivate my spiritual life? Is it that if I do not take the necessary measures, my spiritual life is at risk of never reaching its full development?
That's true. Take the necessary measures, step by step. And if you, do whatever you can in your present circumstances, Krishna will make it so you can take the next step. Krishna wants us back more than we want him, actually.
And just a few quick thank yous. Damodar Priya says thank you very much. Narahari Devdas says thank you very much, Gurudev, in response for your questions.
All right. I'm sorry I didn't get any further. I always got plans to go beginning, but we'll pick up there. We'll continue with this second text next class. And, interesting purport by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And we'll get a chance to understand that also. All right. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.